All right, we are live. Thank you for tuning in to this Orchard live stream. I'm here with my great friend Shama Rangwala, who is a scholar of the humanities at York University. Feel like you're about to correct.
Oh, no. I mean,
Okay.
I'm a professor in the humanities department. Humanities
Okay.
is really broad. So, like more specifically, I kind of work on like cultural studies and critiques of liberalism, kind of from a Marxist, like cultural studies perspective.
Right. And I wanted to have you on today to talk about a piece of legislation that is quite concerning from many different standpoints, and that's Bill C-9, the Combating Hate Act, which was signed into law in June and is, as of last week, now in effect. Um, it and we'll get into what it is, but I guess my first question for you, Shama, is I wanted to ask, what do you have against combating hate?
I mean, as a hater, I I don't want to combat the kinds of hate that I espouse. Like I hate fascists, I hate
Yeah,
uh, you know, I hate turfs, I hate capitalism, I hate uh oil companies. So yeah, I don't want to combat that kind of hate. I want us to harness that.
yeah. Pure hate is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
The good type of hate, the hate that it's a hate for avarice and greed and inequity, um, which could be considered hate under this incredibly broad, sweeping legislation that has been criticized. I mean, across the political spectrum. I think the quality of criticism varies. But the conservatives voted against it, all five, or I guess six, because I think Bluery's still in the House, but he's like independent New Democrats voted against it. Elizabeth May, the only Green MP, voted against it, and then it was supported by the Liberals and Bloc. Um, so I guess Shama, let's start with why specifically is this piece of legislation so concerning for haters like us?
Yeah, so I think that it's really important to think about how the stage for this was set long ago. So, just want to thank you, Jeremy, for having me on. I used to do so much media and stuff, and I just like haven't been doing it as much. But I'm on sabbatical now and kind of getting back. So, I'm thank you for having me on. Um, when I was doing my PhD in 2019, the UCP became the governing party in Alberta, as you and your viewers probably know, and they mandated post secondary to take on the Chicago principles, and they were very much like we need freedom of expression, and it sounded like an appeal to kind of liberal forms kind of universality, right? That like, oh, okay, so like we'll just let everyone speak. But we knew in 2019 that that was a kind of red herring. It was a way to. Oh, I saw Odyssey, so like we can use Trojan horse liberally, if we
I
want.
haven't seen it yet.
Um,
No
okay, yeah,
spoilers.
no spoilers for something that you certainly know the whole story of, from watching
Yeah,
The
for a story
Simpsons
that
or
was
whatever. Yeah,
written
yeah,
thousands of
thousands
years
of
ago.
years ago. But yeah, so thinking about like these kind of liberal appeals to norms, to universality, how could you be against free expression, right? That was 2019. In 2021, the Proud Boys were famously in Canada, it was big discourse, designated as a terrorist group. And many, especially on the left, were wary of this. It's not that we, don't hate the Proud Boys, don't want them to like face consequences for their like white supremacy and misogyny, et cetera, et cetera. But what does it mean for the state to be able to designate a group as terrorists? And at that point, like Harsha Walia, like many people in Canadian media were saying, like, this legislation is something that will be turned against us, will be turned against like people who are protesting for climate, of course, Palestine, will be turned against the left, the kind of enemies of the state, quote unquote. Um, like, we could be the hater we are haters of, like, settler colonial, like, racial capitalist states, right? And so, I was doing a lot of media then, and I said, "It's not just that that will happen," which, of course, we need to be wary of, and we're seeing, with C9, a kind of, like, logical extension of that. But it is that it allows the kind of, white supremacy of the conservative party that is, like, very much embedded with the same kinds of groups that, like, Proud Boys, there was, like, Canada Proud or, like, these sort of, like, soft white supremacist groups that just were, like, taking over social media, if you recall, like, especially earlier in the pandemic, anti-vax groups and stuff like that, or even earlier, the kind of, yellow vests that were gathering at Alberta legislature. 'Cause I lived in I don't think you were in Edmonton then. But it
No,
allows
I was in
them
Medicine Hat.
to take the kind of most extreme versions of what is, in fact, the state project, right? Of white supremacy, of anti-indigeneity, of resource extraction, et cetera, to take those most extreme elements and say, no, 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 but we've designated them as a terrorist. So, like, the state is good, actually. Like, we're actually the protectors. And so, all of this, like, we think that certainly, like, the protests, and the kind of panic around anti-Semitism, that has been going on, since Israel's escalation of genocide after Al-Aqsa flood, that can be we can talk about that as being kind of proximately causal to this, but the stage has been set for this for a really long time. Um, the ways that liberal norms are weaponized. A lot of us were like warning about this, like even 10 years ago, that like when you start saying protect groups based on X or Y, it's only going to be a matter of time. Like I was saying this because I had a men's rights activist truck parked outside my apartment in Edmonton for like a few years in the 2010s. And, if the oppressed people are the people who hold like structural power, not as individuals, but, as a category, they can claim oppression, and that's, like, what we're seeing with kinda Zionism right now. And so it's been a really long time that the ways that, like, liberal norms have been weaponized, it's come to fruition now, and Mark Carney is the right person to do this. I mean right as in, like, in the sense of, like, who the banker who has, I think, like, a non-binary daughter, like,
Mhm.
he will, like, drink beer,
He listens to Down with
he
Webster.
yeah, he did Nardwuar during the election, like, we love Nardwuar,
Oh,
like
yeah, and he did quite well, yeah. That was a
yeah, and so,
good
like, these
segment.
kinds of things where when so many of us were like, the conservatives being in power would have been worse. It would have been worse for lots of people, but that does not mean that we should at all accept, the kind of just like, Carney is so much worse, like, we knew that he was going to be bad. He's a banker who's been, like, parachuted in to save liberalism. Um, we knew that he was gonna be bad, and he's so much worse than we thought,
Mhm.
right? But the blame for this is not just like, "Oh, this banker came in," or the Palestine protests, right? That they're so that really this has been set for so long, and one of the reasons I thought apart from, Jeremy and I always have, like, really great long conversations, like, as friends. It's kind of fun to do it, with an audience now, but we also
Mhm.
co-authored a piece, that's also on The Orchard. You guys can find it on the encampments, and the argument being that what is legible as violence is always, um delineated these concepts of like violence, of threat are delineated in relation to the state, which is why a Palestine encampment, even if it's very peaceful in quotation marks, we should never appeal to that kind of thing, right? Just like don't appeal to innocence when we're talking about incarceration. It participates in the logic. But, you know, let's say in Edmonton, like, it was people that we know in Edmonton, Jewish people that we know, Palestinian people that we know who were, like, having a Shabbat, like, that was one of the only things that happened at that encampment, right?
Mhm.
And, wood that was just there was like, oh, someone could stake somebody with it, I don't know, like, vampire style. They, like, made stuff up, right, to say that this was violent, to actually do state violence, right?
Right,
There were
the
pepper
wood
balls.
pallets,
Yeah, yeah. It's a fire
said that
hazard or something, yeah.
yeah, and those were gonna be used to build a fortification, um, and, even if that were the case, so what?
But the
in
kind
those.
of violence they were subject to was not legible as a threat, right? It was the
Right.
state doing it. And so I
It
do
certainly
think
wasn't intimidation.
certainly, but I mean, also like in this article, the example of the arms, like the kind of weapons testing, like showcase for arms buy manufacturers and buyers that was happening in southern Alberta. That's not considered violence, even though it's like how genocide happens, right? That's not violent, but like faculty and students of like different identities gathering on campus, that is considered violence. And so this is just like it's only intensified. Like Alexa flood has intensified everything, right? But Alexa flood is not something, it was not like a breach. It is something that just crystallized everything, right? And so the stage was set long ago, but what has happened since 2023, fall 2023, yeah, has been all of the things that we sort of thought, oh, maybe this will happen, or maybe that will happen, or this will risk this or that happening. It has happened, right? Um, yeah, Revolutionary Party of Canada, the right to starve or freeze to death in the street is not violence either. This is like Marx's double bind of freedom, where he says freedom under capitalism is the freedom to exchange your labor for wages or and the freedom to, like, die in a ditch, basically. Like, that's capitalist freedom.
Mhm. And yeah, maybe let's get more into the specifics of the Combating Hate Act. I think you did a good job of laying the groundwork, is because I think clearly the ostensible intention behind it is this largely manufactured crisis of anti-Semitism in Canada, and that being sort of the linchpin of talking about all these other forms of hatred that I think operate very differently than anti-Semitism. In the use of a strengthened carceral state to crack down on political expression, um, that many, but certainly not all Jewish people don't like and might find makes them uncomfortable or even intimidated. So let's talk about. So already on the books, we have it's illegal to incite
Oh,
hatred against.
can I just jump in before we get into that? Because
Yeah.
you are talking about the anti-Semitism, and I wanna offer something that was really clarifying for me that one of my dear comrades, who I won't mention, but, this person does a lot of work with Jewish communities, like anti-Zionism, like talking to Zionists and stuff, and, she has told th this person, they have told me that, there isn't anti-Semitism is not structural, and it's obviously not structural, which I think your viewers will know, in the ways that like a group that is appealing to the police, like appealing to the state, is not structurally oppressed, right? That they can make these kinds of appeals, that the prime minister will like speak to them immediately, and it will be like a primetime speech. These are not signs of structural oppression, but they told me something that was really clarifying for me, which is like anti-Semitism, like put that aside, but anti-Jewish sentiment is on the rise. And
Hmm.
that I think is like a really important distinction because there's way that I was in the Jewish students group in my high school. Like I had a partner in grad school who was Jewish, went to Hebrew school. Like I mean, I have just like grown up with a lot of philo-Semitism, and a lot of Jewish people in my life, like including Jeremy, including like a lot of my really people who are really
Hmm.
close. I'm not saying this to be like I have a black friend or something. I just mean that
Yeah.
like if somebody like me who like loves so many Jewish people, like I feel anxious, like, if I see somebody, with, like, a Star of David now, which is, a symbol that's been, like, carved on the bodies of Palestinians into the land of Palestine, I feel, like, scared, especially as, like, a racialized woman, like, if I look at them the wrong way, is, like, something going to happen to me? Or, like, there is, like, if we wanna talk about fear in all of this, like, I do think that, like, the way that, um institutions that are Jewish have, like, weaponized this idea of fear has actually made, like, somebody like me feel, like, fearful in some circumstances, right? So these are sentiments, these are not structures, though, but, like, the way that I'm racialized is, like, structural because the state, is, like, settler colonial, it's anti-Muslim, all of this kinda stuff, right? But I just mean that, like, the idea of, like, sentiment, I think people can see, like, "Oh, I would like to" if I meet, like, a Jewish person, maybe you would like to know what they think about Palestine before you, like, date them or something, right? Like, these are discourses that happen online. They're like, "Oh, why does everything have to be so political?" But I do think that I do think maybe that's, uh, just like a reality of when, like, institutions have been fully captured, that maybe there is going to be some, like, sentiment, but it is not the same as, like, being denied healthcare or housing or, being, like, over policed, right? So this is just something I'm kind of working through. Revolutionary Party of Canada is saying, how do we counter the increased use of modern bad faith's definition of anti-Semitism? So as a professor, I would appeal to like the 19th century origins of the term anti-Semitism. But this is like different. It's difficult to do in a kind of like colloquial setting, right? Like when you're just like hanging out and you meet somebody. I think talking about structures, talking about like the appeal to police, talking about like what are the actual incidents of anti-Semitism. We know that the police did an investigation saying that like racialized youth are being paid to shoot at like Jewish-owned businesses at night when, like, no one's like, do you know what I mean? Like, just, like, what is the concrete evidence of something like this, talking about, like, housing and policing and stuff like that, but, yeah, if you think about, like, the concept of anti-Semitism is very recent, it's 19th century, it has nothing to do with anyone outside of, like, Europe, like, it's
Wait, you're
anti-Semitism.
saying it's not the world's oldest hatred?
So
That it actually has a material manifestation or
yeah, so the
historically
thing
has?
is that, um, my like minority groups have been have had different forms of like discrimination in their different contexts, right? Like your experience as a Jewish person like 500 years ago in Palestine or in Eastern Europe or in France or in North Africa or like these are going to be different experiences, right? Like you can't say it's the oldest hatred because that reproduces an idea that there's like one kind of like Judaism that like Jewishness, let's say, like I'm like not to get into the theology of this thing that is called Judaism, but Jewishness as like an identity that there's one kind, right?
Mhm.
There hasn't been, right? And obviously like Christianity, some of the strains of Christianity are like against like Jewish people because of like the ways that they conceive of like who killed Jesus and like that. Like, do you know what I mean? Like there's like that's all, but those are specific to like particular places, right? Even today, like, with the war on Iran, like the US Israel war on Iran, like they bombed like a very old synagogue in Tehran and of course, everybody into like there were like videos of like the rabbi from there. There were community members who are not Jewish who were like going through the rubble with the Jewish community to try to save some of the some of their like old scrolls and things like that, right? So your experience of being Jewish in Iran for however many generations is going to be really different than being in the UK, what we call now the UK or what we call now like Germany, right? So this is, I think, just kind of dismantling some, and it was hard for me. It's hard for me. I was taught that Israel was founded because of the Holocaust. I had so much Holocaust education. One of my favorite teachers in high school, he was like an avowed Zionist. Like that's why I joined the Jewish students group because my friends were in it, and this teacher was like incredible. Like, and I'm sure that he supports Israel even now, right? But he was like such a wonderful teacher to me back then, right? So I do think that like it's so much unlearning. Even the idea of it being an ethno religion is actually about producing a singularity of like this idea of Jewishness. And a scholar at York, Emma Kaufman, wrote this essay in Lateral. Jeremy, I think you've read it, or I sent it to you, but
Oh,
um,
yes, yes.
yeah. So I don't know if you can like link to it quickly, but it kind of it's like a critique of the idea of, like, anti-Zionist Jew as, like, as its own identity, as its own kind of
Yeah.
totalizing identity, that
Mhm.
actually this idea of, like, a coherent category of Jewishness needs to be dismantled, because if you actually understand the history, there's so many different, and thank goodness there's so many different kinds of Jewish people, right? Like, humans are diverse, like, we actually any kind of, like, tradition lives through, like, dynamism and diversity and whatever, right? So yeah, Samir, colloquially is a different question, but personally, learning about the Jewish fund is often what people point to. Yeah, I mean, certainly, learning about Molly Crabapple, I haven't read it yet, but I did get it, has
Yeah,
a book
same. I
on
bought
the
it the other
blend.
day, actually.
Yeah, so I think that history is important. I think that what really helps me to dismantle that relationship between the Holocaust and Israel, which is really the first step, I think, like everybody needs to to learn that,
Yeah.
was to learn about like Zionism in the early 20th century and the ways that they were, uh, buying up land and doing lots of terrorism, which we know. Um, you know, uh, yeah, so, like, also the ways that Holocaust survivors were treated in Israel, as recently as 2013, I think, like, a third of Holocaust survivors, were living under the poverty line in Israel
Mhm.
and, being called soap, because it and there was this kind of the birth of Jewishness as an ethno-religion with Zionism. I've read some, like, old documents, like, from that time that we're blonder now that we are in Israel and things like that, right? Jeremy, you likely know more about this than I do, but as a professor, I will say, like, the way to dismantle any of this is always to learn more of the history. Um, yeah, but, it's difficult. It's difficult, to circle back to the idea of what is legible as, like, X or Y is in relation to this state. This would not me saying all of this to, like, Evan Solomon is not going to change his mind. Like, it's not going like, education is not going to
Yeah.
work when you are motivated to, like, reproduce the same, like, systems of oppression, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and so maybe we can talk now about the Combating
Mhm.
Hate Act and sort of what it does. So it's already a crime to incite hatred in Canada against an identifiable group, and also law enforcement is able to tack on a hate motivation as sort of an aggravating factor for an existing alleged crime, right? Now, the Hate Act quite widens the scope of existing anti-hate legislation quite a bit. So, how does it do that?
Yeah, so I guess one of the first questions we have to ask is, like, why do we need this? And it's one that I think a lot of activists have tried to ask their MPs. We have this existing legislation, as you say, against hate. And I think we have to understand that the purpose of this, um, is to expand the powers of the state, right? And so, we can see it in continuity with all kinds of different technologies of fascism, like AI, like AI surveillance, things like that, right? That this is just another way when we don't have food or water. I think Canada is far from that kind of situation. But even thinking about like in the US, like they it's like dangerous to eat fresh vegetables or something, right? Like when things start getting like really bad, the state needs to have some way to manage that while still having some kind of appeal to the law, right? For all the people who are benefiting, who are still benefiting. Um, and so you villainize the people, like you villainize poverty, which has been all of capitalism. You villainize homelessness, all of capitalism. You villainize communism, which we're seeing more and more because communism is the only thing that can fight fascism. C-22 is a full 1984 size step towards fascism, says Revolutionary Party. Yeah, I mean, these kinds of surveillance, like in our devices, in our, we it's not optional to use a lot of, like, these big tech companies, right? Like, I work at York University, and we have a Microsoft ecosystem. So, like, to do my job again, I can exchange my labor for wages, or I can, like, die in a ditch, right? That's the double bind of freedom. So I exchange my labor for wages, but I have to use Microsoft. So the idea that the state can expand while still, like, maintaining the veneer of universality, kind of liberal universality, is to use hate, right? Well, how could you be against hate? That's why, like, I love that Jeremy asked that as the first thing because we need to assert that, like, antagonism is important. Just like diversity is what keeps, like, a community moving, right? And I don't mean that in the liberal sense of, like, was it United Colors of Benetton, but, like, ideological, all kinds of things, right? Contestation is essential. It's, like, essential to being human, and it's essential to history or, like, dialectical materialism. So, like, we need antagonism. Antagonism isn't always bad. I always say, like, I'm a proud hater, so, um, you know but if it's, like, your mom and dad or, like, maybe not your mom and dad, but, like, whoever's, like, walking around the street, look outside, they would be like, "Of course I am against hate." And so what is presented as common sense, right? If the Trojan horse, the horse is the common sense, but what's inside it is like fascism and state repression, right? And this is again, it's not new. I always think about how, because like I was actually trained as a modernist, like my PhD's on modernism and like contemporary adaptation, and like thinking about like, the Nazis were also stupid, right? Like, it's not like the way that people are stupid and, like, the hog mentality is not, like, new, right? Hogs abound, and they abound in space, like, geographically, and they abound in time as well. So as long as people feel like, "I'm okay," they I think there's probably lots of people who support this bill, honestly. But people who are conservative, which is to say they want to be able to have that freedom of speech to say turf stuff, they're appealing to it on, like, religious freedom of religious grounds and stuff. Um, and, people on the left, not liberals, people on the left, fascists and like, communist leftists have good analysis, but different, uh, ideas of what to do, and the liberals are the ones who are like, "Oh, we're just gonna make the state, lubricate capital accumulation," which also means like imprisoning people, cracking down on dissent, in the name of protecting people.
Mhm. Yeah, and so I think let's to give listeners a sense of what changes are contained in the legislation. The Canadian Bar Association has a critique of it, as does the Canadian Labour Congress. Also, more conservative groups like the Canadian Constitution Foundation have their own objections. But just to get a sense of what this actually does, okay. Um, for starters, it creates three new offenses that didn't exist before. A hate crime offense, like specifically hate crime, but also very general in that. Well, we'll get to the definition of hate in a moment. Willfully promoting hatred against an identifiable group, which is already a crime, and then intimidation, which is new, which again very subjective. Um, the It also creates on a federal level the ability to create exclusion zones for protests. Cities like Toronto, Vaughan, where I'm from, and Ottawa already have their own like local bubble zone bylaws. I believe Calgary does as well, which was aimed at stopping transphobic protests outside drag queen story hours at libraries, which I at the time thought, this might be weaponized to prevent other things. Um, and um, and um, it also uh, just one second. The okay. Um, So it makes it a crime to intimidate or obstruct people from accessing places of worship, schools, community centers, and other places that are associated with an identifiable group that could be a target for hate crimes. Uh, um, and then it updates the charge of willfully promoting hatred against an identifiable group by displaying certain symbols in public. The legislation itself only names Nazi symbols, but it also makes clear that organizations that are designated as hate groups, as terrorist organizations, like the Proud Boys, but also groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, the PFLP, um, uh,
But let's say a group also like Samidun because that's a
and
prisoner's,
Semi Dune, which
and
is
so that
now.
is a really that is more of like a test case because they're
Mhm.
an advocacy group for incarcerated Palestinians, and they have been designated terrorists in Canada as well,
Right, because
relatively recently.
the US and Canadian governments have said, and no journalists have asked them to provide evidence that they have been actually secretly funneling money intended
Mhm,
for to so Palestinian prisoners can buy meals regardless of which faction they're a part of to the PFLP. Again, now, as I understand it, that would be a crime, fraud, and no one has been charged with a crime.
nope.
Though under this new legislation, Charlotte Cates, the leader of Semi Dune, which is based in Vancouver, who was arrested by police for a speech she gave at a rally, uh, I mean, they might have an easier time charging her with
Mhm,
a hate or terrorism offense. And we've already seen in Toronto someone charged with terrorism offense for a speech they gave at a rally 2 years ago, which is extraordinary. And I'd love to see more criticism and scrutiny of that in the mainstream press, where there's been almost none, because that is a significant escalation. Again, I don't think that charge will stick, even with these new policing powers. But that's not the point, right? The point is for law enforcement to fire warning shots to people that we're going to put you through the justice system for whatever reason we want, and even if the charge gets dropped, your name is dragged through
mhm,
the mud. Your life will have been, if not ruined, then at least made very difficult for the period of time that you're under the arm of the state and afterwards. And I say this because one of the major critiques of this legislation is how, for the new offense of, promoting hatred by showing a symbol that the state doesn't approve of, it removes the requirement that the attorney general needs to sign off on promoting hatred charges. Now, I mean, in Ontario, your attorney general has been begging police to do more to crack down uh, on solidarity activism, completely nonviolent uh, political expression. um, but that does remove an institutional safeguard that could at least provide a check on the exercise of policing power. Now, it's just up to a cop. And a prosecutor, again, may decide not to pursue those charges. But again, you're going to get arrested. Your name's going to be in the media, and you're going to be called a terrorist, regardless of whether the prosecutor seeks to pursue those
Mhm.
charges or not.
So one of the answers to the question of like why this piece of legislation is to expand lawfare. And so like we see like our friends at the grind are being sued, that like they could be called like hateful, right? That there's like you can the idea of like hate then becomes like the worst thing that could possibly happen is hate, but hate again is defined by the state. And, it's kind of a satire, like, reading the bill. It's like there's different definitions, go here to do this, and the effect of that is, like, we've already agreed that this is what hate means, that we already agreed, like, what intimidation, and so, like, therefore, um this is why, this is very clear legislation. It's absolutely not, and I think probably, what my guess is, though, Jeremy, you can, tell me what you think, is that the first, like, major, case around this will probably be, like, white anti-Zionist Jews at a synagogue protesting a land sale or something, like, that seems like the classic kind of, group of people who might be like, "We would be protected from charges of anti-Semitism in these ways to be able to, you know, to test this, to test C9. So like I'm sure that we will see something like that happen and like all power all power to them like when that does happen. I put
Yeah,
in the
well, I
chat.
think you'll lead a lot of people to be like, oh, wait a minute, we're charging Jews with anti-Semitism. Which
Mhm.
I mean, in Germany,
They
Jews
do.
in
They
Germany are
absolutely
like
do. Yeah.
1% of the population, similar to in Canada. Yet they're like 30% of people charged with
And in the
inciting
UK as
anti-Semitism.
well, around
Yeah,
Palestine Action, there's like Jewish grandmas that are being like dragged by the police. It's
yeah.
um I do think that Canada I wonder, like, well, the media will have to do their job, and I don't mean the mainstream media, I mean, like, all of us who are, like, part of it, like Jeremy, or, like, adjacent to it, like I am, will have to, like, do our part to talk about this. Um, yeah, I mean, I think, like, the test case is the illegal land sales in the synagogue, because if the idea is to protect access, this is one of the things about this bill is that it protects access to those institutions, but does not say anything about the what is happening inside those buildings, right? It doesn't say that it protects illegal activity inside the buildings, but is that de facto what's happening if it is protecting access? Like these are the questions that will have to get played out and yeah, I don't know. It's the thing about the man in Toronto who gave the speech and getting charged like that and it's long delayed, right? I mean like the charges came much later. It's quite terrifying. Uh but yeah, it will only expand. And in a city like Toronto, these protected institutions are everywhere. It basically means like, where are you supposed to protest? I put in the chat the charter statement on C9. And you can see kind of how if you are not a very critical person, oh, okay, like this will be fine. Because look, they're saying they're going to protect like religion, which is the thing the conservatives are very concerned about, right? They want to, especially like a lot of conservative Christians want to be able to like protect their turfery and things like that, without being said like told that they're being hateful against a protected group. Um, but the other thing it says, this is a thing that I think is interesting and could be contested, where it says that if you are there, if you're like outside this institution for the purpose of obtaining or communicating information that is protected. But what if you set up a table outside a synagogue with information um, you know, about pogroms in the West Bank on the land that is, like, being sold inside of the synagogue, right? Like, what is that just communicating information, or will that make people feel unsafe? And this is like, Jeremy, you started talking about this, we can expand on it, but the idea of, like, the subject and object, right? The person doing the intimidation and the person feeling it. If the onus is just like on the person feeling it to say, I feel this, then that like switch from like subject to object is very, very dangerous. So yeah, I don't know if you have more to say about that.
Yeah. I just think with this piece of legislation, as well as what the Trump administration has been doing in the states, particularly around post-secondary institutions and enforcing its will on them, you really see this weaponization of this hollow, woke, liberal identity politics from a decade ago, that the African American scholar Alfred Jr. is called the politics of personal
Mhm.
testimony, in which the um and you see this especially with the intimidation charges that are added, where it's nothing to do with the intent of the person, which is integral to like the criminal justice
Mhm.
system, is determining mens rea, determining their state of mind.
Mhm.
Just abandoning that and just talking about the impact on someone, how it makes someone feel. You know, I mean, yeah, I can see, I know a lot of people who would be intimidated if there was a protest across the street from their synagogue. But these protests aren't happening for no reason. And it's not like they're, as some have described it, they're, disrupting regular prayers at these synagogues. It's protesting specific events that the synagogues are choosing to hold that are in contravention of international law, which our Canadian government purports to uphold. But then we just saw reporting from Evan Dyer yesterday that Benjamin Netanyahu has been allowed to use
Yeah.
Canadian airspace now for the third time since the International Criminal Court has put a warrant out for his arrest. But I do think you're with this legislation, many others. I mean, we could talk about the Building Canada Act,
Mhm.
for instance, certainly
Yeah.
the Strong Borders Act as well. We're seeing our federal liberal government participate in this new global authoritarianism consensus, that is done most crudely by Donald Trump and here in Canada by Danielle Smith, but it is cross-partisan consensus. I mean, you've seen all the things we were describing in the UK
Yeah.
were being done under a Labor government, right? In Germany, I believe it's an SPD coalition with their conservative Christian Democrat Party. Yeah, this is a concerning trend. And, again, during the election, I mean, Poilievre was shouting from the rooftops about how he wanted to deport non-permanent
Yeah.
residents who participated in. I mean, again, he does this maneuver where he talks about actual anti-Semitic hate crimes and then says these hate marches that are encouraging these crimes, drawing
Mhm.
a causal link when really what's there's a correlation. Um, and very Trumpian, exactly what the Trump administration's been doing. Whereas Carney was quiet on that matter, and then passes the Strong Borders Act, which allows the minister to revoke, alter people's permanent residency and citizenship applications at their own discretion, and cancel temporary residency for whatever reason they decide, based on very broad national security grounds. And I think the Combating Hate Act, what it really exemplifies is how um, this liberal facade of pluralism and tolerance and all these things is actually being used as a weapon
Mhm.
to destroy political solidarity. with people who, again, are being killed with Canadian weapons components. Canada's barely let in any Palestinian
Mhm.
refugees, including people who've been approved for to study at Canadian universities. There's this push by pro-Israel organizations on the one hand to say, no, 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 don't talk about this. Let's just talk about local issues. What does Canada have to do? It's happening 2,000 miles away. And then at the same time, pushing to use the strong arm of the state to suppress, to limit Canadians' democratic rights, which it can't. Israel's ambassador to Canada, Ido Moded, has explicitly stated is a goal of his to curtail um, rights to protect the Jewish community from this specter of anti-Semitism that is more urgent than fighting any other form of bigotry. We're being told,
Yeah.
um, and yeah. I mean, was there anything you wanted to add on that, Shana?
Yeah, like a few things. So, on the, just on the last thing that you said, um, one of the things that was just like an outright lie, but like very noteworthy in how it was glossed over was Mark Carney saying that we're seeing the most anti-Semitism in the post-war period, like that we've ever seen. And I think that like that's, like, a depraved thing to say, considering, like, that there were, like, institutionalized forms of anti-Semitism, in, like, the '50s, and, like, like, it's just, like, how could you possibly like, that's the immediate post-war, but, I mean, how could you possibly make that claim? Now, to answer that question, I think can go back to what you were talking about with the protests. I think, like, we're exhausted, not, like, maybe as individuals, but collectively from the grind of capitalism, from like depressed wages, like all of the kind of economic conditions. And so like people's incuriosity and I would say ungenerosity um is like has material causes. I think though like I do I do get frustrated from time to time, but there are material causes for that, right? And so when people see something like a protest, which is meant to be disruptive, they might say like, fuck these people, they're loud, they're indecorous, they're preventing me from getting to, you know, work or like to buy my meager treats that I can afford, like they're disrupting the like peace of daily life, right? People who are participating in those protests would say that their disruption is nothing compared to genocide, right? Is nothing compared to the kinds of things that people in Palestine are going through. And they would be right to say that. But the ways that, you know, the if you see the spectacle of like tens of thousands of people in the street, right? Which was happening like most weekends for a while. There were lots of
Hmm.
people who were coming out. That is how Carney is able to say this if he can if the incurious people who do not let generously do not have the time or space to educate themselves, nor like the motivation to like they're motivated to not do that, um, can say, "Oh, yes, because I've never seen so many people protest Jews." Right? If I and so, of course, this is the worst that it's been since, like, Nazi marches in the
Yeah,
'30s. It's
it's just
just
like
like that, right?
Weimar
Because it's
Germany.
protesting Jews. And if you accept that, then that is what it would look like, right? So, in the chat, a protest with no disruption in a state-sponsored parade. Absolutely, and the way that we see this happen is something like the Walk with Israel that has MPs attend, that has corporate sponsorship, that is sponsorship from places like Fabricland, right? Like, where, like, my mom would, like, buy her, like, fabric to, like, sew curtains. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's like a Canadian institution. Those kinds of places and the state itself, like my MP Leslie Church, of course, she's like the biggest like philo-Semite genocide lover, like attended many like Brad Bradford attended. And so that's exactly this the state sponsored parade. And then you have Zionists take like videos and say, look at how nice we are. Look, we're not yelling. We're not being like, we're just having like a party. We have our kids here and stuff like that, right? Because of course they're getting everything that they want, right? They have all the full backing of the state. So it's not a protest. It is a celebration of Zionism. It's a celebration of genocide. Now, in those March with Walk with Israel, you'll see when protesters do come, who do the police protect? That will tell you exactly where, like, the state is located, right? Um, I saw a video, I think it might have been posted by Samira. It was, like, circulating of
That's
this man that
Samira Moyedin,
yeah, there
Toronto-based
it was,
journalist.
yeah, so it was, this man, like, had, there were kids around, and he was, like, threatening one of the Palestinians with rape and was on
Hmm.
video doing that, and it's like, yes, so you're having your nice family-friendly event, but as soon as somebody's like the state that you're celebrating is committing genocide, they're like, "You should be raped." And that person is getting the full protection of the police and the state in that moment, right? He's walking alongside MPs, maybe not like 2 feet, but I mean that's who the march is composed of, people who are aligned with the state. So, yeah, I mean, I do think, like, the idea that, like, everything should stop for this genocide. The things that we
Yeah.
have seen, not just, like, the past through like, we could say Alexa flood intensified the genocide, right? But this has been happening, before 48, right? This has been happening this is the great thing about learning about history is that a lot of this violence was, like, predating the state of Israel. It was, you know, the 19th century dream of, colonizing Palestine,
Right.
right?
I mean, eliminating the Palestinian people is a long-term, key long-term element of the Zionist project, as anyone familiar
Yeah. And
with
how can that
the
happen?
history
What are the
ought to know.
conditions under which that can happen while maintaining the facade of liberal democracy? It is to say that Palestinians are anti-Semitic and just like Nazis. It's to use terms like Islamo-Nazi. It is to connect people who had nothing to do with it. The Jewish colonizers had much more to do with the Nazi party. Like you can look up Havara Agreement, had much more to do with the Nazis than the Palestinians who had nothing to do with the Nazis, right?
Hmm.
But then they're the ones who have to be, you know, vilified in this way in order for Israel to say we're the only democracy in the Middle East. In order for them to say that 48 was their declaration of independence, to try to paint it as if it is part of the wave of mid-century decolonizations, like in South Asia and parts of Africa as well, right? To say that we're just like that, right? We're getting our independence. Uh, Canada does not call July 1st Independence Day, right? It's like Dominion Day, I guess. But like it's a settler colony. So like
Hmm.
independence, like yeah, anyway. Um, just to say that like I mean the US says that, but I have my books here. The Counter Revolution. I know Jeremy is also an American studies person. Um, but yeah, that like
Have been in the past.
you went to grad school for American studies.
Did.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think we've done a good job laying out the state repression that is being given this liberal happy face through the invocation of the Combating Hate Act. I mean, we could also even before this talk about the um no knock raids that were being done first thing in the morning for
To
the
people we
people who
know.
well, I don't know if I
Oh.
know any of them personally, but if I lived in Toronto currently, I would probably know some of them.
Well,
But I
one
guess
of
that's
them
right
was a
because there
grad
was a York
student. One
University.
of them was a grad student at York who had absolutely nothing. Like, again, we don't need to appeal to innocence, right? But this person actually did have absolutely nothing to do with it. They just lived in the apartment where one of the people they suspected did it, like, formerly lived. And so, like, woke up in the middle of the night with, like, a cop's boot on their bed and was interviewed by the Toronto Star. So this is, like, documented in mainstream media. But certainly, like, I started off by kind of doing the history of how like this has been building for a long time. But it's also important to know, like, laterally, like, it within our moment, that it's part of a constellation of, like, so many different forms of state repression.
Hmm. And Heather Reisman, the billionaire
Mhm.
CEO of Chapters Indigo, was able to call up the chief of
Yep.
police to discuss the entirely peaceful protest against her flagship store and her company's complicity in the genocide of Gaza, but via the Hezek Foundation, a charity that incentivizes people to join the Israeli military by offering scholarships to Jewish people who don't have family in Israel.
Lone soldiers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and she used to be explicit about that's what charity does, and then once a lot of these Jewish Canadian charities that were violating the law started to come under
Yeah.
scrutiny, many of them have lost funding or losing funding, including Honest Reporting, which, if you look at their arguments that they're using on appeal in court, I mean, they're just trying to drag it out. But um, yeah, then the messaging for Hezek Foundation is like, what do you mean? We're just giving scholarship to Israelis, to people who move to Israel. What army's got nothing to do with it, and that's, I think it became increasingly clear um, because other organizations like JNF Canada lost
Yeah.
their funding. That you can't fundraise for any foreign military.
Mhm.
So that's the law. You know, don't like it. I don't know. Uh, go to law school, or actually,
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, to say that Heather Reisman is, like, an oppressed minority, like, not all minorities are oppressed, and this
yeah.
has been
And
true
this is,
throughout
I mean, a
history,
great
right?
example of this
Like
hollow liberal identity politics that is really become this instrument for state authoritarianism, where this billionaire,
mhm.
white billionaire, who has never faced I mean, I don't know how old she is, but I don't think she's old enough to have faced discrimination as a Jewish person in Canada, which, as we know, was certainly a common thing when, say, my grandparents were
Mhm.
coming of age here. That she is an oppressed minority because she feels that way, because she feels like she's been targeted because she's Jewish, even though she has a charity that incentivizes
Yeah.
people to join the military that is credibly accused of committing genocide as we speak. Um, so again, I mean, but I think what's interesting in a very bleak way is, while we've seen this ratcheting up of state repression, specifically against the Palestine Solidarity Movement, although the Canadian Labour Congress issued a quite strong statement
Good.
against Bill C9, talking about its potential to impact labor relations, because again, that's a huge talking point for the managerial class. When their workers are on strike, they're intimidating us on their picket line. They're yelling at us as we cross their picket line, right? So that can also be weaponized against organized labor. Um, and then conservative groups are mad because basically the bloc got the liberals to remove a section that existed in the existing hate legislation, providing an exemption from for like good faith discussion of religious texts.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, Bloc Québécois obviously did that to target Muslims in particular, but a lot of Christian groups are not happy with that. Andrew Lawton, who's an extremely right wing conservative MP, very pro Zionist, was very vocal against the legislation for that reason, because he's an evangelical Christian
Mhm.
who not so fond of the 2S LGBTQ community. But it's also worth noting organizations like EGAL, which is a
Mhm.
pro 2S LGBTQ plus advocacy organization, not a particularly radical group, has also issued a strong statement denouncing this legislation, saying that while superficially it might in some ways protect our community from overt expressions of hatred, it doesn't do anything to deal with the root causes, and it risks chilling
Yeah.
the very protests that queer people have engaged with to secure the amount of rights they have over, you know,
Mm.
the past, 50 years plus. But for some, like again, the conservatives are against it, and particularly odious conservative MP in Toronto,
Mhm.
Roman Baber, big freedom convoy guy, is proposing legislation that actually would make it illegal to express support for a terrorist entity. There's a piece in the Canadian Jewish News, which is essentially stenography from CJA. It wasn't, since October 7th, it's certainly become that, and just about how Jewish groups are praising, um, the Combating Hate Act. And, you might want to get the perspective of a Jewish group that doesn't support it, of which there are several, but that would require the CJN to acknowledge that there are Jews who don't feel threatened or offended by the existence of Palestinians and people who want them to live in freedom. Um, and they were talking about how Roman Baber, who is Jewish, wants to go further and make it illegal to express support for entity that Canada has listed as a terrorist organization, because right now it's illegal to, materially support them. That's not the exact language in Canadian laws. That's what's used in the American laws, but that type of thing, fundraise for them, those things. But it's not elite because we do have freedom of expression.
Mhm.
You can, and great thing about freedom of expression is you can say all sorts of things that other people might find extreme, but are nonetheless your right to say, as long as you aren't, violating other laws we have. And of course, we can critique this labeling of organizations as terrorist entities, as you did quite well, Shama, um, early in our conversation, but this is a major escalation of the national security state. So the conservative opposition to the Combating Hate Act is very narrow. And they want to replace it with something that I think is more narrowly focused on repressing
Yeah.
Palestine solidarity demonstrations. And we've got some commentators in the media.
Mhm.
Haven't seen a lot of commentary criticizing the Combating Hate Act. I'm sure you could find it in existence. It was something that was widely discussed, but our regular commentariat um, doesn't think this is enough. And, there is this crisis of anti Semitism. Of course, we do know that a lot of Jewish institutions and businesses in Toronto specifically have been targeted, what I would say is vandalism. Again, shooting bullets into a window when there's no one in a building, yes, of course, is intended to intimidate, but it's not an act of violence if there's nobody there. It is an act of vandalism, and it's a serious act of vandalism. But we also know, because Toronto Police has said as much, that these are guns for hire who are being paid to do
Yeah.
this. We do not know who's paying them to do it, but it should raise some questions. But for some in the Canadian commentariat, um no, this is just proof that actually we need more state repression, that what's happening isn't enough and we need to go further. And I think the most really smugly self-confident and obnoxious proponent and tireless proponent of this narrative is one Robin Urbach at the Globe and Mail,
Mhm.
who before she was at the Globe and Mail was in charge of CBC Opinion. So we got essentially Jonathan Kay and other National Post columnists to writing opinion for the CBC now. It was very skewed rightward. She didn't last long. One particularly stunning incident was when Jacob Hoggard, the lead singer of the band Headley, was charged and then eventually convicted with some pretty serious sex offenses. She commissioned an op-ed from a Headley fan saying that she doesn't believe it and he's innocent. So this is, and before that, she was, of course, a National Post columnist,
Yeah.
which she was sort of just thrust into, never done a day of reporting. And that's, I think, one of my more conservative beliefs is if you're going to be a columnist, you better cut your teeth as a reporter for at least a bit, so you actually have a grasp on these issues. You actually have contacts among, say, experts that you could call up.
Mhm.
But Urbeck doesn't need that because she's better than you, and every word she writes makes it clear that she wants you to know that. So I'm going to pull this up. I'm going to screen share, and
Yeah,
we
so
can.
this is, flashbacks to Big Shiny Takes, RIP, the old podcast where we actually, it was one of my favorite podcasts that I ever did was Big Shiny Takes, going over
Yeah,
articles, so
yeah, and now I try and do this a bit on this podcast, or this stream, because it is the caliber of commentary in Canadian media has not gotten any better since our podcast ended. Um okay. Uh okay. So I'm gonna share the screen. And so for a second you're gonna see like an infinity of Ian Shama, and then we'll get to the op-ed. Okay. So here it is. Headline is hate absolutely has its place in Canada. It has been normalized, ignored, and excused. Um, and I think one thing before we dig into this, to acknowledge is that during the Black Lives Matter protests, during other movements that were talking about hate and racism, Urbeck was incredibly dismissive of them, had not a word of support to offer. Certainly, you'd never hear her write about like hatred against Indigenous peoples or actual forms of bigotry, which I think is a better word to use in this context for the reasons we've already outlined, than hatred, that are actually baked into our institutions in Canada. Shama, with that in mind, would you like to do the honors and read this inscrutable screed?
sure, yeah, BST style. Hate absolutely has a place in Canada. I mean, as I said, we're haters. It is
Yeah.
accepted by virtue of our collective indifference, by the way our leaders refuse to define it in precise terms. Hate has a place in Canada when the Prime Minister's signature address on anti Semitism clings desperately to anodyne generalities, lest the hate that fuels that anti Semitism turn on him politically or worse. He
Wait, is
went to
she?
he went to Holy Blossom and he like gave the speech about like that's where I think that's where he said it was the worst in it's ever been in the post-war period,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah. Our
that's not
social
enough.
compact is broken.
That's not enough, right?
No,
Um,
she wants action. She wants boots on protesters' necks,
yes.
as will be clear now.
She
For
wants
somebody clear,
her hate to be legitimate and everybody else's hate of her position to be delegitimate.
yeah,
Actually, to have violence done towards everybody else.
right, exactly. Like actual
Mhm.
like state structural violence, not um,
Yeah.
you know, hearing chants she doesn't understand and
Yeah.
has no desire to learn about. Now, for a column that complains right in its first paragraph about anodyne generalities and refusal to precisely define hatred. You'll might notice in this column that there is no precise definition of
She doesn't
hatred
do it
either.
either. Yeah.
It's just a bunch of examples that she finds. Some which could very well be examples of hatred if we know the motivations of the people behind it, and other things that are just like her haters, right?
Yeah.
People telling her she's an idiot, which is very polite for a
Yeah.
way to describe her.
But
Anyways.
the problem with that is that, like, this has been true since even before the start of Israel, is that Zionism is fueled by feelings of persecution. So the more that you fight against them, the more they feel justified, right? And so that's why the protests, which needed to happen, I don't want to live in a world where people don't turn out for, like, against genocide, right? But those protests also, like, allowed Zionists to feel like they were the most persecuted people in the world because it was not about their Zionism, it was about their Jewish identity, which they have made as, like, Zionist.
Yeah,
Um,
and if you want to see an example of actual hatred, you should look at Robin Urbach's Twitter feed. At least in the last few months of 2023, probably throughout 2024, probably large chunks of 2025, and then she pivots to actually, yeah, what's happening in Gaza is really sad, and I don't really want to talk about that though. But what I want to talk about is how everyone who's against it is doing violence against the Jewish community because Jewish people say that they feel unsafe. And the Jewish people who don't say that, yeah, I mean, they don't really matter. They're not in
yeah.
my social circle. They're weirdos who spend too much time on the internet. Um, yeah. So that
Yeah,
just so
this is one of the ways that, like, the category of the Jew is bounded by Zionism, because if you don't identify with the state of Israel, you get excluded from that, right? In the ways that she's
mhm,
like, those people don't matter. Like, they're not, like, really Jewish. And there's all kinds of epithets and stuff that get, like, I don't wouldn't repeat, but that get thrown against
mhm.
like, Jewish people uh who don't subscribe to Zionism. So uh yeah, I
Which is
mean,
increasing, not enough, but
mhm,
it is increasing. There is a generational divide,
yeah. It's
and
not institutional, but it is, like, it's unsustainable. I mean, like, they can't
yeah,
I think, like, among young people, like, as I work in a university that, like, has a lot of Jewish students, there's lots and lots of Zionist Jewish students, but there are also lots of anti-Zionist Jewish students as well.
right, right. And there's a generation, and as I've attempted to convey to some, people who support Israel in my life, that this is a generational divide that's happening, and I'm not just a crazy person. And I think for a lot of especially older people who grew up in the shadow of the Holocaust, many of them had parents or close relatives who were Holocaust survivors. Um, by no means excusing it, but it is understandable how they might have their Holocaust trauma triggered by people protesting against something that they've been told is the only way to prevent another Holocaust. But you know what? We live in a society. There are
Yeah,
many other people with trauma, and their trauma matters too. Palestinian people's trauma also matters.
yeah,
And in fact, I would suggest matters a lot more at this particular time, given what is happening to them currently at home and increasingly abroad in their diaspora communities, being
yeah.
targeted for state repression. Anyways,
So,
do you
like,
want to
so
start?
given those feelings, um, I can see that it could be painful to, like, disabuse yourself of that, but it is important for people to recognize that Zionism is a primary form of anti-Semitism in this moment of history. Um, that the kind of anti-Semitism that Zionism is leads to so many other kinds of anti-Semitisms, right? And so,
Hmm.
like, one of them is, like, the ways that, like, we're just saying that, like, Jewish people who are not supporters of Israel get excluded from the category of the Jew, right? That is, you can say that that's anti-Jewish hate, right? Um, but it's not legible as such. Okay, should I keep reading?
Yeah. So the first of four paragraphs that starts with hate has a place in
Hate
Canada.
has a oh, that's her rhetorical flourish. Hate
Yeah.
has a place in Canada. So the two locations of the same Jewish bakery, I don't know, like, I would just say as somebody who what I wanna say to all of this kind of stuff is that I hope they do an extremely thorough investigation into,
Yeah,
like, who
I
is doing
think we
these
should find
things.
out
I
who keeps attacking Jewish businesses, who keeps paying people, because we know
Yeah,
that's happening. That's not conspiracy theory. TPS said so. Who
yeah.
is paying people to attack all these Jewish institutions when there's nobody inside? I mean, again, Kiva's Bagel Bakery, bit of stretch to call it a Jewish institution, but it's a Jewish business, and
But they
Jewish
say
owned
that
business.
Indigo is a Jewish business, but
Right, but this is
it's not a
actually a
bagel
Jewish.
shop that your grandma, like, it
Yeah, yeah. Whereas
started,
Kiva's
like.
is right,
Yeah, it's like, but Indigo, they call it, like, a Jewish bookstore,
which is
like,
insane because
Jewish-owned
it
bookstore.
was
It's
at the time a
not, it's
publicly traded company. So,
like yeah.
and the assumption that most of its shareholders are Jews, some would say is anti-Semitic, but of course, people who reflexively say that aren't thinking; they're feeling out their trauma. Um, anyways,
But you
so
could
yeah,
would you say that, like, a third of Holocaust survivors in, like, the study was, like, 2013 or something, living under the poverty line in Israel is not anti-Semitic? Like, I just mean, like,
yeah, I think
the
cutting
way that
supports for the few remaining Holocaust survivors to
yeah.
fund genocide, as the
Yeah,
Israeli government did in
absolutely. Do you think
its, I think, 2024 budget.
doing a genocide in the name of the Jewish people is anti-Semitic? Carving a Star of David and a Palestinian man's face is anti-Semitic? Like, we just this is the thing, like, I said, like, a while ago about, like, historicizing the term to the 19th century, but now it's like it's become one of these terms that, like, kind of freely circulates and is only legible in relation to Zionism.
Yeah.
Um,
But
okay, it was
anyways,
attacked with
again,
gunfire.
we do not know
We don't know who did
that
this.
who did this.
We do know that
Um,
there is some organized pay for pay for shooting that is happening in this city. We do know that because 'cause it's been reported on by the Star. That is a thing we know. We don't know who
yeah,
did
it's been
these
reported on
ones.
by the Globe too. Maybe
Yeah,
Robin Urbach should read the Globe, but
but it's just jumping to these conclusions. I mean, yeah, her hate has a place in Canada about, like, the Jewish neighborhood. Um,
and here's I like this line, this one. After in
mhm.
one weekend, what did she say?
No one can remember how many similar incidents that amounts to since the war in Gaza began. Would it not be important to know? Like, it's just, but this is like, it actually worked. This is the Barry Weiss thing, right? Like,
Hmm.
a she heads a news organization and she's a bad journalist. Like, this bad journalism actually, like, is rewarded. Like,
Right,
you
in this
Jeremy,
lack of
you would never,
curiosity.
as a good journalist, Jeremy, you could never write a sentence like that.
Yeah, what do you mean
Like,
no one? What
what
do
do
you
you
mean
mean no one?
no one can remember? Like there aren't groups that track this with very problematic methodologies, but it's fundamentally not true. You can go to any of these pro-Israel groups and deduct the anti-Semitic incidences that are like someone was wearing a keffiyeh. I saw Free Palestine graffiti and find okay, what are the acts of vandalism and gunfire and count that up. You know, something journalists might be interested in doing. Of course, Urbach has never done a minute of reporting. She's always been a commentator
Yeah.
whose commentary, serves the interests of the ruling class. And she just keeps failing upwards, like her disastrous tenure as the head of opinion at CBC. You know,
Yeah.
um, and but oh no, but she's
So
actually
this
trying.
this is very interesting here, um, because she would never like Israel doesn't have a regime, it has a liberal democratic government, but the Xi regime and talking about Uyghurs
Right,
and
hold
like
on, we'll get
she
there. We'll
doesn't
get
know.
there.
Oh,
We'll get there.
we're gonna read the whole thing. Okay, okay. Go.
Yeah.
Not just what's on the screen. Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
you can go to the second paragraph that starts with hate has a
okay.
place in Canada.
Hate has a place in Canada, and you can usually find it on the weekends at the corner of Bathurst Street and Shepherd Avenue in Toronto. It's an area with a heavily Jewish population where pro Palestinian demonstrators have set up camp nearly every Sunday for more than 2.5 years. So the Israeli embassy is roughly 12 kilometers south of this intersection. Bathurst and Shepherd is where these protesters have chosen to flaunt anti Semitic caricatures of Jewish people and cosplay as Yahya Sinwar, the mastermind behind the October
The
7th attack.
mastermind. She thinks she's such a good writer. I'm sure everyone
She
in
thinks she's in a superhero Marvel movie or
in
something.
well, of course, that's where I mean, because it's interesting, because Urbach is as it pertains to Israel, this blood and soil nationalist, but it does again show this connection, which I know is sort of your expertise, Shama, between this politics of liberalism and this really ugly ultra nationalism, where everything is just a Marvel movie, right? We have
Yeah.
good guys which represent the liberal state, and bad guys who are trying
Regimes,
to.
regimes and
Right,
masterminds.
right. We'll get to that. But also, I wanted to clarify something from you, as someone who lives in Toronto. Those protests at Bathurst and Shepherd were a counter demonstration to pro-Israel protesters, correct?
Yeah, I think as far as I know, like I've never like I don't go up there. It's not super far from
Yeah,
me, but like I haven't gone to any of those like to observe or anything like that. Um yeah,
yeah.
I
But so that's
it's
my
not
understanding.
just
So this
like
is a
going to the
counter protest.
neighborhood. It's not
No,
just
no,
like
no. And
going
this
to
is
the
what some
neighborhood to
people
hang
think,
out.
because they're told in the media that there are
Mhm.
people marching through Jewish neighborhoods to protest Jews. And again, this is a counter demonstration. As I understand it, it's not happening anymore.
I don't hear about it, honestly. I mean, I think yeah, it's
And let me posit that Bathurst and Shepherd is not a Jewish only neighborhood, because we do not live in Israel.
it's not we don't have
Um,
segregation in
yeah,
Canada,
yeah,
so
like not certainly not in the way that they do in Israel. Um, uh,
right, we don't have like
and
official
I would,
segregation.
yeah, and I would posit that there are many people who live at the specific intersection, or maybe near the intersection, who don't approve of what they're seeing out of Gaza all the time. And when they see a demonstration in support of that, they
Mhm.
might think, hey, maybe we should make it clear that not everyone in our neighborhood supports this. Again, it's interesting defining this neighborhood specifically as this one intersection that does have a lot of Jewish people living in it, but also has a lot of non-Jewish people. And not that you'll ever hear it from Robert Urbach, but
Yeah.
yeah, there are a lot of Jewish people who are appalled by Israel conduct, and not just its conduct, but the structure of the Israeli state that makes this its sort of conduct that we're witnessing inevitable.
So just like in the chat, it says that Bathurst and Shepherd is those protests are still happening.
Oh, there. Okay.
Thanks for letting us know. Like I really haven't followed that part as recently as July 26th. Okay. Um, yeah, I mean, people are organizing in all kinds of ways, right? And it's yeah. Okay.
Well, I remember too, there were protests at the intersection of, I think, what, Wilson in the 401, or so, no, that's not an intersection, Avenue in the 401. And people are saying, oh my God, this is a Jewish neighborhood. And it's like, yeah, it's also a main thoroughfare of traffic.
Yeah.
Also, again, where do you think these people are coming from? who are protesting in these
Mm.
neighborhoods. I mean, some of them might be coming from other neighborhoods to support their comrades and friends, but I would venture a guess that many of these protesters live in those neighborhoods.
Okay, should I keep reading?
Yeah, because then
Yeah. Yeah. The choice
you're gonna love this
okay.
rhetorical flourish.
The choice to protest at this location speaks to the centuries-old hatred that is motivating these demonstrations. No one is
It's blood
protesting the
libel.
Hmm?
It's
Yeah,
blood
well, I
libel.
mean, so one of my comrades, has written about this, and she's called it misanthropic. That this idea of like eternal hatred of Jews is Jewish exceptionalism, of course, but it's a Jewish supremacy as well. It's like that
Mhm.
we're like so special. This person is Jewish who's written about this. But
I
like
mean,
the that it's misanthropic. Yeah.
I've talked to people in my youth, and this was certainly part of my sort of anti-Zionist education, who will tell you with a straight face that Jews are more persecuted, have historically been more persecuted, at least, than Black people. And it's like, it's not a
This
competition. And
it's a supremacist vision of
yeah,
the world and of people.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's what people say when they're committing genocide, right?
Yeah.
It's always,
Of course.
we are the victims. Why are you making us do this?
Yeah. Golda Meir saying, like, "We can forgive them for killing our children, but not for making us kill their children."
Right, which is
Uh,
what every narcissistic
every,
abuser
like,
says.
fascist yeah, of course. It's yeah.
Okay, so
Okay,
centuries old
okay,
hatred.
next
So
sentence.
let's do
Next
some
sentence.
whataboutism, some
Yeah.
classic. It would not be a pro-Israel
No
piece
one
of
is
commentary.
protesting the persecution of Uyghur Muslims by marching through like, she gives a fuck. Also, she doesn't know anything.
No, she isn't.
Probably
She
beyond the
can tell
scope
you a
of
damn
this
thing.
stream today, but, like, she doesn't know what the fuck she's talking about. No one is okay, by marching through Chinese areas of Markham, that would make no sense. Chinese Canadians aren't responsible for the actions of the Xi regime. But the standard is different for Jews in Canada. So they're more oppressed than Muslims. They're more oppressed than Chinese people. They're more
Yeah,
oppressed than yeah. This is like Julian Casablancas on Subway's take saying like
yeah. Which
Jewish
he walked
people.
back.
Oh, he walked it back. Okay.
A bit. He just like, look, I support a two-state solution. I'm against,
Oh, that's such a fantasy.
expansionist Zionism, and I'm sure
The
he said it
article went
because
away. Where did you mean to unshare?
no. Oh, okay.
Can you
That's
reshare it?
weird. I sure can.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, no, okay. Um, Yeah, so hate has been given a space at Bathurst and Shepherd while police stand by. While police stand by and political leaders look away, it will never be enough for Zionists because there's no end goal, right? Like the end goal is like the Israelification of the world. And whether
Yeah, I
this is
mean,
the
it's
thing,
what
whether Robin
certainly the
Novak wants that or
Israelification
not
of Canada.
personally, whether she wants that or not personally, she doesn't have to know that that's what she's participating in, but it will never be enough. It's not just like it will never be enough, in some kind of, like, abstract sense, but it will never be enough because there's no endpoint. Like, there's no like, structurally, this is a thing that will keep, like, expanding.
Yeah, and the idea that police haven't repressed Palestine solidarity activism out there
It's like
is outrageous. Anyone
it's
who's literate
outrageous.
can tell you that. I mean, you probably won't
I
hear
don't
about it
think that
much in the
she's
Globe and Mail.
literate. I mean, you can see, like also, the only time these Zionists ever talk about Muslims is their, like, Uyghur thing to and Shi regime, like, it's like, no one I mean, this again, beyond the scope of this, in the live chat, somebody said Uyghurs and Tibetans are oppressed or CIA. Beyond the scope, I guess, of us to talk about today, but yes, it's
Yeah,
also
let's let's
her
I
illiteracy.
yeah. I mean, but that's always the case, right? Whenever anyone criticizes Israel, protests Israel, it's like, well, what about
What about this or
these
that?
countries that we're targeting for regime change? Why don't you protest them? And it's like, well, our government is
Our government is
already
in support yeah,
doing that.
exactly. Our
But
government
that,
is, like, anti-Chinese enough, so, like,
yeah,
people are mad that Carney's even doing the EV deal, but, okay, it went away again, so I can't see it.
Oh, come on, Substack. All right. So
Okay.
again, this is the third
Oh,
paragraph now that
wow.
starts
She
with
keeps
hate has a
doing
place
this.
in.
She's a
Like,
bad.
I understand. Yeah, if she was a good writer, okay, use it twice. I wouldn't, because it's very hackneyed language that I think reflects an inability to actually think beyond slogans. But
Her examples don't say who did these things and their motivations. You know what I mean? This is where we
well,
were
so
saying
far,
that
yeah, well, already.
there's a confusion of subject object, right?
Right. And
Or
she's
like an
already she's
inversion of it.
conflating shooting at Kiva's bakery, which someone was almost certainly paid to do by who we don't know, and protesting in a neighborhood that has lots of Jewish people, and not just confining your protest to the Israeli embassy, which I have a feeling if that were done, Robin Urbach would not be satisfied.
Yeah. Okay. Hate has
And
a place in
anti
can.
and
Oh,
an anti-Semitic placard at one of these protests that I know the one she's referring to, and yeah, it's anti-Semitic, but again, when it was the Freedom Convoy, it would be interesting to look up what Urbach was saying about the people flying swastikas at the Freedom Convoy, and whether we should tar the entire movement with that brush, even though, I mean, one of the key organizers of the Freedom Convoy, Pat King, is a Holocaust denier,
mm,
by the way. But certainly the broader trend of right wing political columnists who all think, essentially the same things, some disagreements on the margins. The Freedom Convoy, it was like, whoa, whoa. I mean, this is a mass movement. We can't just judge it by its most extreme adherence to here, where, we have to repress this movement because people feel unsafe.
okay. Hate has a place in Canada when prominent academics, business professionals, and activists have absolutely no reservation about airing their prejudices. Oh, I can't. You have to go back.
Oh, oh shit. Yeah. I opened her tweet.
About airing their prejudices and bizarre conspiracy theories about Jews in public, when a prominent writer and former CBC radio host confidently declares that a woman performing a Nazi salute at a pro Palestinian protest in Montreal was an obvious plant, and scoffs about the recent attacks as a bagel shop in Toronto, calling them absurd instances of purported anti Semitism. When Calgary's then
Okay.
mayor,
So hold on,
Jyoti
hold on, hold
Yong,
on. Hold on.
yeah,
Let's So this is a reference to Samira Moyedin, who we've mentioned already on the stream, a Toronto-based independent journalist who sometimes freelances for the Globe and Mail,
yeah.
which very interesting to accuse her of the world's most ancient hatred. When I don't imagine Samira would be allowed to say call Robin Urbach a bigot in the pages of the Globe and Mail, if she's even allowed to write for them anymore now. Um,
Yeah, we don't
which
know.
there is a lot more evidence than her saying someone performing a Nazi salute at a pro-Palestine protest in Montreal was an obvious plant. I mean, look up COINTELPRO. Protest movements are infiltrated all the time. I think of one instance actually in Calgary where Urbach was just shrieking about someone who is clearly not part of the protest there, who just goes up, holds a picture of Ayatollah Khamenei and does the Nazi salute. And then you have people going up to them and like whispering to them, clearly telling them to leave. Like they weren't
Yeah.
giving him a high five or anything. And that for Urbach is proof that this is a Nazi movement. Again, no curiosity about anything. I mean, again, it is somewhat absurd that all these instances of of ostensibly anti-Semitic vandalism are happening when businesses aren't closed. That they're happening in Toronto, not say in New York City, where there are far more Jewish businesses. And I'm sure people like Robin Urbach think their mayor is, a supporter of um, uh, that violence against Jews. So again,
Yeah.
I wouldn't use the word Samira used. I will say the quickness within which some people, not exclusively Samira by any means, are saying this was a plant or a false flag. I mean, makes me slightly uneasy. I don't agree with it. I wouldn't say that. I would say what we've said, that I hope they find out who did these, but it's more absurd to paint this into a narrative
Yeah.
that is explicitly calling for further
Yeah.
state repression against nonviolent political expression that the author is too incurious to understand.
So, I think that one of the things, maybe we don't have time to like go through this in depth, but like you see Marsha, the link to Marsha Letterman's anti-Semitism is quantifiably bad. I think we need to distinguish between a series of events that um may or may not be connected and are likely not connected, and talking about structural oppression. Like just listing things is not the same as
Right.
like a structural
Well,
oppression, right?
Marsha Letterman is sort of the resident liberal Zionist at the Globe and
Okay.
Mail, who I believe it's in that article says that an example of anti-Semitism is when people dismiss B'nai B'rith, uh, a deeply partisan conservative organization who their past two CEOs have been failed conservative candidates. Of casting doubt on those figures is
Right,
an instance of anti-Semitism.
but you can cast doubt on those figures through, like, rigorous analysis, which I think has been done, right? Not through, like, I don't believe them because they're Jewish people saying this thing,
Right,
right?
which
Like,
almost no
it's
one, certainly no
no
one
one
in
has
any
ever said
position
that. Yeah.
of influence is saying that. Well, I'm not saying some random person on Twitter who may or
Well,
may not be a
random people
bot.
can say yeah, there's
Yeah,
bots,
but no one
and
in
stuff, but that
any
doesn't point to anything
public
structural.
position or public facing position that I'm
No.
aware of has said that. But that's what Letterman does. She launders Hasbara and gives it a
Mhm.
liberal spin that's supposed to be different between this
Okay.
blood and soil slop that
That
Robin
Robin
Novak started.
Okay,
But it's
let's
fundamentally the same.
yeah.
Now let's get to this one. This is
So
interesting.
when Calgary's then Mayor Jyoti Gondek declined to attend the city's annual menorah lighting because she said it was too political, when the
Now,
Vancouver Comics Art Festival decides to ban a Vancouver-based graphic artist because of her mandatory service in the IDF, people turn down that service and go to jail for like you can
yeah, and people
like
serve in not a lot. Like, let's not romanticize this Israeli left that is almost, completely wiped out in the country. But there are people who refuse to serve, who are willing to do jail time for it. There are also people who do serve and realize through serving the appalling project they're a part of, and dedicate their lives to exposing the abuses of the Israeli military and denounce the Israeli military. This Vancouver-based graphic artist, who for some reason the author doesn't name, maybe because people could look her up, doesn't do that. In the menorah lighting, I mean, this was a total controversy ginned up by right-wing media. I mean, Don Braid, who's like 85 years old and was scabbed during the Calgary Herald strike. There's a great episode we did on of Big Shiny Takes with Mohammed Ayash, a scholar at Mount Royal University in Calgary, who's Palestinian Canadian, about Braid's completely idiotic column where he said that Gondek needs to resign. Jen Gerson, who on some issues, I think she can be somewhat thoughtful, also wrote a very bad faith criticism saying that, essentially, and that this was, the mayor failing Calgary's Jewish community. And what all these accounts leave out, and in fact, Gerson is quite snarky in dismissing them, is the fact that this menorah lighting was billed as an event to support
yeah.
Israel in December 2023. This is on the flyer. Gerson tweeted out the
Yeah.
flyer and point out, wow, they're painting kids' faces and they have rides. Wow, so nefarious. And it's like, Jen, you're acting in such bad faith right now. What does it say right in the middle of this flyer that you've shared? Can you read that out loud? And of course, she doesn't engage with
Yeah.
that criticism because it gives the whole game away.
Okay. Hate has its place in Canada when mezuzahs are ripped off the door frames of Jewish homes in Toronto. We don't know who did that. When pro Palestinian protesters in Montreal tell Jews to go back to Europe. When visibly Jewish people are shot with a gel blaster gun outside of a synagogue. When someone attempts to set fire to a Vancouver synagogue. But these are all incidences. They're not who's doing them. Like,
Right. Well, with the exception of a pro-Palestinian protester
oh,
in Montreal telling
yeah.
Jews to go back to
Right, right.
Europe, I don't agree
But
with
we don't
that.
know who did the
I wouldn't say that,
we
but
didn't
we
know who
also
did the
don't know who this
mezuzahs,
person
and
is.
also people do crimes, like, crimes still happen, but nobody who's part of any kind of Palestinian organizing would be like, it's praxis to, like, rip mezuzahs off, like, old people's
Yeah, I
door,
don't
like,
know anyone who
that's
thinks that. Maybe
crazy.
Robin Urbach does. Maybe she has
Like, but
contacts
it's like
deep in the
nobody would
Palestine
think of
solidarity group
doing that. No, you
that
would
we don't
never,
know.
like, that's just, like, criminal. Like,
Yeah. No,
um
and also, if you want to talk about visibly Jewish people shot with a gel blaster gun outside a synagogue, maybe you could talk about people protesting against illegal land sales
and
in
nail gun got shot with
Vaughan
a nail
who got
gun.
shot with a nail gun, and I believe the person who did so got a some sort of conditional discharge, if my memory serves. I could be
Yeah, I
wrong.
mean, when Zionists threatened violence, like at the encampment in Toronto, there was a Zionist doctor, I think her name was Teresa Weiss, but I don't wanna get,
Yeah,
like,
Samira documented.
yeah, Samira documented it, but she said, "I hope none of you need, like, medical care at U of
Right.
T hospital," or something like that, and, she's fine, but
But that's not
there
hate. That's just an individual who's fed up with
but this is the thing about listing things to
anti-Semitism,
say
right?
that
Yeah.
something is structural, which is different than, like, saying you like, "I will use my institutional position to deny you medical care."
Right. And you actually, if you're gonna, I mean, you can, of course, draw structural inferences from, individual acts. I mean, we do that all the time, but you actually have to thread a needle between
You have
them.
to connect it to the structure.
Right.
Yeah.
Which she hasn't done, or even attempted to do, and this is what passes for smart political commentary in Canada. Now, hold on. We've got the fourth and final paragraph where
We know that hate has its place in Canada not simply because these acts have occurred, but because nothing meaningful is being done about them. The prime minister won't name the problem. He'll just like grovel in like holy blossom. But she means like he won't name like we're going to get rid of these Arabs or these Muslims or these Palestinians. Like he won't name. That's the name that
yeah, that we're gonna
like
make protests illegal
yeah,
against
like
Israel.
he. That's yeah. Law enforcement, crown prosecutors, and politicians all blame each other for failing to take action. Ottawa's response is to assemble an advisory council on rights, equality, and inclusion, and to throw money at Jewish institutions to beef up their
Now, I
security.
feel like, Shama, if you wrote a phrase like that, throwing money at Jewish institutions, I wonder what Robin Urbach might say about that. I wonder how it might make her feel.
Do you know
Throwing money at
about
Jewish
the Fiverr, right?
five-ish.
Five-ish. Okay, yeah,
That's
five-ish.
okay. So for those, I will summarize this briefly. So Cars for Kids, which was a scam charity operating out of California. They had that very catchy jingle that gave the impression that if you're donating your used car to them, that would go to help children. Ended up being a front for an ultra orthodox charity called URA that was spending those funds on matchmaking programs for young Jewish adults, i.e., not kids, sending them on trips to Israel and
For their
buying real
like
estate in
fascist
Israel.
breeding program.
Hmm. And the mascot for URA is an
It's too
anthropomorphic stack
good.
of cash named Five-ish,
It's
which
too
is
good.
anti-Semitic. Like it is. And again, just I I would probably, because I'm sure Urbach would say, well, Jews can participate in anti-Semitism too, and I agree with that. And no better example is and its mascot, and many other Jewish supporters of Israel who will say all sorts of things about Jews
Yeah. Again,
who,
Zion Zionism is a primary form of anti-Semitism in our
right.
historical moment. Um,
Okay,
okay,
okay.
so she says that's as clear an admission as anything that hate indeed has its place in Canada. This is in italics. We know that hate is here, but instead of tackling it, we'll give you money to insulate yourselves from it. It will never be enough because even the fact of getting state funding is used to say it's not enough. You know,
Mhm.
like it's like, okay, so then if you weren't getting this money, you would be mad that you weren't getting money.
And by the way, funding for First Nations has gotten cut quite
You know,
substantially
here's
in the
like a
last
thing
budget.
that like we haven't talked about, but I just want to say if I were an indigenous person in Canada hearing about this anti-Semitism panic, I would have like daggers in my eyes and like I just uh
You'd feel
like
like you're going
yeah,
insane.
you'd feel like you're going insane. Okay, this is Canada's new normal. A bakery's windows are smashed and we sigh and move on. Buildings are shot at and we click our tongues. Many Jews are now actively exploring emigration to places where hate is less readily excused or ignored. Unlike in Canada, where politicians insist this is not who we are, while pretending not to recognize what this country has become. Do you know what, Jeremy? You could write this article. This is the thing about the liberal forum and why the content matters is because you could write this article if you were a Black or Indigenous person, not about the leaving if you were Indigenous, but you could say that the liberal recognition, like the critique of liberal recognition, is a critique that is valid in other circumstances, but not in this one. And this is another form of like Zionist colonization and appropriation that like taking this on because you could say something like, we know that hate is here, but like we're going to do a DEI panel or something instead of like actually taking action. This is absolutely a liberal tactic, but the thing is, it doesn't work when you're like white and have institutional power and have the state on your side and all of that, right? Like it doesn't
Right.
work, but it's like using that liberal form. And so there's a different version of this article like written by like a Black or Indigenous person about like the actual foundational like oppression that the settler colonial state enacts towards them, that would say a lot of these same things, right? But it would this is why it's like there's this Israeli restaurant in my neighborhood that has like hummus and like tabbouleh and stuff
Mhm.
like that. It's like this is appropriation of
Yeah.
form.
Yeah. All right, we got one last paragraph.
Okay, a day after the attacks on Cuba's bakery, Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture Mark Miller, who will also chair the Advisory Council on Rights, Equality, and Inclusion, wrote on X that, quote, anti Semitism has no place in our communities and it is an attack on the values of inclusion and respect that define our country, end quote. But that view is precisely the problem. Anti Semitism absolutely has a well established place in our communities now. Of course, it's defined as criticism of Israel. A weekend trip
Mhm.
to Bathurst and Shepherd will confirm that. There are probably Jewish people who are part of those protests, but they don't
Almost
count.
certainly.
They do not count for
And I
for
bet when that
Zionists.
person did raise that classically anti-Semitic placard, I'm sure they got a talking to
Yeah.
from people because as people who have actually been around who aren't
The placard
ensconced
of the
in.
Ayatollah and the swastika, the Ayatollah has nothing to do with Nazism. Like it's an insane placard to
Yeah.
begin with.
Yeah, like the idea that this
Like
is
it's like you
someone
have
who's
to have
part
a
of the
stupid
protest.
brain. That's
Yeah.
why I think that it's like that person's a Fed. Like, anyway, I don't have evidence of that. I'm just
Yeah,
like it's so stupid.
I asked around the people I know in the Palestine solidarity space in Calgary, like who was this person? They were like, we've never seen them before.
It's
They just
so
showed up. We
stupid.
told them to
Yeah.
leave. And again, a journalist might want to look into that. And you can be a commentator who does a bit of reporting so that your commentary is informed.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
but
Last
it's a lot easier to just write,
okay.
takes on, tweets.
So this is how it ends. The more pertinent question before the government now is if it intends to actually do something about it or simply offer money for bulletproof glass and continue deluding itself with the notion that hate has not been normalized in Canada. So this is the thing, like Zionism is a structure of expansion, repression, exploitation, like capitalism or like imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. It's voracious. It will never be enough, right? So what she means is that um, she wants it to be named, anti-Palestinian racism is so normalized that it can be a demand in, like,
Hmm.
a column in the flab like, the newspaper of record in this country.
And now, what's noted by friend of the pod, Desmond Cole, um, he quite astutely noted that Urbach does not specify what she wants, and this is a common thread among these Zionist hysterics about anti-Semitism. Is we need more to be done. We need more to be done. Jesse Brown also, more needs to be done. Okay, like what? And they don't want to say it. They don't want to say it. And so Desmond asked Robin on Twitter. You have the tweet pulled up, right? It's pulled up on the screen. Oh, Shama, you've left us. Where'd you go? All right. Well, anyways, I'll talk about this tweet from Desmond, who asked Robin Urbach, aside from the many new laws, like the Combating Hate Act, police mobilizations and expressions of political solidarity, we've already seen, which specific government interventions are you calling for to address individual acts of violence, bigotry, and vandalism against Jews? Very good question, Desmond. If only there was an editor at the Globe and Mail who would have asked Urbach the same thing. And she does respond. I have her on mute.
Yeah, she does respond,
I have her on mute,
to
so I don't
say
see her response.
here,
But
let
I
me
can go to her feed. Uh, oh, and don't forget the shooting at the U.S. consulate, which is also a hate crime against Jews somehow.
Okay, she says leaders actually identifying, calling out what's happening, so that means she wants
Wait,
them
hold
to
on.
name
Wait, can you send
Palestinians.
me the link so I can pull it up?
Yeah, should I just put it in this chat?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. And this is someone who's, I believe, quite sympathetic to her, asking, well, what would you recommend? Uh, okay. So among other things, so she has other things in mind. She's just not going to say those. I wonder what those might be. Leaders actually identifying and calling out what's happening. No more mealy-mouthed generic statements about anti-Semitism. Okay, so again, it's this explicit conflation of opposition towards the state of Israel with persecution of Jews, right?
Yeah.
That is what she's saying implicitly. She's just too much of a weasel and a coward to put it honestly. Cracking down on protests in Jewish neighborhoods and actually charging people for violations. So it's not illegal to protest in a neighborhood that you claim is Jewish. Again, I think this raises questions. How do you define a neighborhood? Like Bathurst and Shepherd, that is not a neighborhood. That's part of a larger neighborhood. So I don't know what you mean. And again, so how do you define Jewish neighborhoods? Does that only apply to Jewish neighborhoods? Can people walk through a Jewish neighborhood on their way to a protest that's outside of a non-Jewish neighborhood? You know, closing the egregious time lapse between investigations, see arrest. She's
Yeah.
citing her buddy Matt Gurney's screed that I haven't read, but I'm sure it's much the same. So this egregious time lapse between investigating someone and kicking down their door at the crack of dawn and hauling them out of their home for engaging in, again, nonviolent protest against a genocide. There needs to be quicker timelines. The
Yeah.
police need to be doing more of that. She won't say that because I don't even think she's aware of how the people arrested for vandalizing Indigo were treated. But again, egregious time lapse. Like, again, we want to reduce our rights, right? Police and the authorities need to do less due diligence, and they're already not doing any when charging people, when using the state apparatus to go after Robin Urbach's political opponents. Developing a coordinated law enforcement strategy. No more blaming police for failing to make arrests or crown prosecutors for failing to pursue charges. So again, no checks and balances, just police arrest people, crown prosecutors, pursue those charges, even if there's no evidence. Yeah, that'll be a great way to reduce crime, which I'm sure you can find, actual like violent crime, which I'm sure you can find instances of Urbach and her pals complaining about how police aren't doing to tackle anything to tackle, that the streets are unsafe, which is this, again, this neoconservative narrative that we need the state to uphold traditional values and enforce order,
Uh-huh.
that is increasingly devoid of any sort of intellectual justification. And now it's just like, no, actually, the state's going to do this because it can, and we're going to go after my political opponents because I feel unsafe. And no, I don't have to explain to you why I feel unsafe. That's anti-Semitic. You would never ask another member of a minority community to explain themselves when they make accusations of bigotry, which is, laughable, to suggest that other communities are, less persecuted than Jews in Canada. But yeah, here we are.
Okay, so I think that's enough, Robin. But I do think that, like, as we wrap up, I think one of the questions that is going to be tested is what amount of what level of criminal activity within one of these protected spaces will override this protection, right? And so the thing is, C9, it does not say anything about the content of those buildings, right? It's about that access. And so, if the state is like, we love land sales, this is just commerce. It's mere commerce that's happening, right? But like what kind of crimes are like permissible, right? Um, I think that that's something that's going to be tested. And I think that we're going to see a lot of charter uh contestation, like I put earlier in the chat, the charter statement on C9, where it's really trying to be like, "Don't worry, guys, like, it's gonna maintain our charter rights," but I do think people are gonna contest that, and one of the things will be, like, where is this, like, overridden, right? Um, because the bill, like, there could be all kinds of stuff, like, happening inside, right? But, like, if you're impeding access to it, you're violating the policies of this bill, but criminal activity should supersede. It's just Canada doesn't enforce international law, which we know because Netanyahu flew through our airspace,
Mhm.
yesterday or the day before, I mean, in the last few days, so
But I'm sure our enlightened commentariat, our intellectual
I wonder about our
superiors
courts, though, like, I know our
would
media sucks, but, like, our courts may like, we'll see what happens when it gets to the courts.
yeah, essentially, because I mean, again, there's going to be a charter challenge,
There's
and you
gonna
can
be
tell, but
multiple charter
yeah.
challenges, and they know that that's going to happen, and so, like, the government is also prepared for this, right? Like the governing coalition of Zionists are like prepared for it. But I do think that it's going to tie up so much community resources. Like all of this lawfare is just siphoning money away from like money we could be using to like take care of like people to eat and like get housing and stuff, right? I mean, mutual aid and stuff. Instead, it's like, oh no, we have to actually like support people in these lawsuits.
No, but we actually have to cut those to give police more money,
Yeah.
because that's how, right, that's how we get better policing, is actually increasing police budgets, right? And
Oh, people should read
and of course the military,
Desmond's
we need
piece
to
on
be
the
strong, right?
breach on the police.
Yeah,
Yeah, of
I mean,
course,
it's
this is
total
all part of the
shilling with the
fascism.
cops.
Yeah.
It's no matter what happens, police get more money. And the second Chow is like, I want to give you a bit less more money than you asked for, you know, very powerful forces mobilize against her and she backtracks.
Well, we can't let Brad Bradford be mayor. I
Well,
do
I
feel
think
like,
Chris Alexander running for
oh my
mayor
lord.
will siphon some votes away from him.
Oh yeah.
Though
Hopefully, like it's good that he's in the race.
But the problem is, I can't
If
see
he,
Chris Alexander getting more than like 2% of the vote. I mean, the one of the few. I mean, maybe he's in there to make Brad Bradford look more charismatic and likable by comparison, because there aren't many people
that's like
in
galaxy
Toronto
brain.
who can do that. But yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. Yeah, I mean, I haven't been following Toronto politics very closely since I haven't lived there in almost a decade. But I follow it on the margins. I follow it closer than a lot of people I know who live in Toronto do.
You should come in the fall and you
Is that
can
when
do
the
some
election
live.
is?
I think so, right? Do
Oh, it's October, right?
a mayoral election.
I'm in book mode. Book. Oh, by the way, my
It's
book, which
October
has nothing to do with what we
26th.
were. Well, has a little bit to do with what we were discussing, because I do talk about what I call the new authoritarianism.
Yeah.
This, sort of Frankenstein monster created by decades of neoliberal and neoconservative policy, and how Alberta's premier Danielle Smith is, facilitating that and is doing so in lockstep with Carney. And I think that's one of my more perhaps insights that people would find counterintuitive, that Carney is a full partner. He's not being hoodwinked. He's not being pressured. And he's certainly not outmaneuvering Smith, as some have suggested. He is an equal partner in this. And
He just doesn't care about like the social conservatism bullshit, but it's like it's still
but
part.
he'll allow it to happen,
He'll exactly
right?
like
As
he
we see
doesn't
in
care
Alberta,
about it. Like
in
he's like
Saskatchewan with trans rights.
yeah, yeah, that's what I mean by he doesn't care about
He
it. Like it's
Because he
like
just wants people to make money.
yeah,
And that's his. And so for a while it seemed like it was this ESG, very voluntary commitments from the banking sector. That was his thing, right? That we need to have values
yeah.
beyond
Values TM.
shareholder, yeah, beyond shareholder profits, right? It's good for business, is having value, woke capitalism. He's the ultimate woke
Yeah.
capitalist, which is why, to go back to what you were saying at the beginning, Shama, that he is in many ways the perfect emissary
Yeah.
for this authoritarian boot stomping political paradigm that we're living in now.
Okay, well, it's we've been yapping for 2 hours as we do. So I'm
Last chance
gonna
for
have to get
questions.
going. But yeah, if people have questions, eh, we have had like a couple dozen people listening, which is nice.
Yeah, and I think that's at once. There have been more, and then
Yeah,
people
there's
watch it
people coming in
afterwards.
and out. I kind of miss doing this kind of thing. Like I used to do podcasts all the time and things like that. And now that I'm on sabbatical, this is my first media thing of sabbatical. So thank you for
Well,
that.
depending on some personal news I might be getting in the next few days, I might this might be my last sort of hosted podcast or stream for a while. So hang tight. Might have some big
Yeah.
news, or I won't, and then we can continue doing this. But either way, Shama is on Substack. Follow
Don't
her.
jinx your news.
Yeah, I'm just saying, either way, it's kind of win-win for me. So
But you should come visit Toronto and then we can, I don't know, do some
January.
fun stream. Okay, January? Okay.
January, I'm gonna do a book thing
I'll
in
be in
January.
Edmonton before that. I'll be in Edmonton
Right.
in September to
Yeah. I mean, I've been sort of coming back to Toronto, try and do
mhm,
it twice a year. So I feel like the 2 J months are,
J
well, I guess
months.
there are 3 J months, but January, June.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyways, thanks so much for tuning in,
Yeah, it was
everyone.
so
Shama
fun.
Rangwala,
Thanks for all of
professor.
the comments in the chat. It was really it's like a cool way to interact with people.
Yeah, have a lot of fun. And yeah, stay safe out there.
Yeah, you too. All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye.